The moment Detective Sarah Martinez realized the masked protesters surrounding her unmarked sedan had no idea they were about to assault a 20-year police veteran was the same moment she decided to teach them exactly what happens when you attack the wrong person. Sarah had been driving the same unremarkable gray Honda Civic for 3 years, carefully chosen for its ability to blend into any neighborhood from upscale suburbs to drug-infested street corners. The dented bumper and faded paint job made it perfect for undercover work. Nobody looked twice at another beat-up economy car navigating the urban landscape. What the vehicle lacked in appearance, it made up for in hidden capabilities: reinforced door panels, bulletproof glass, and communication equipment disguised as an aftermarket radio system. At 42, Sarah Martinez had spent exactly half her life in law enforcement, following in the footsteps of her father, Captain Roberto Martinez, who'd served 35 years before retiring as one of the most respected officers in the department's history. Unlike her father's generation, which focused primarily on uniform patrol and traditional detective work, Sarah had specialized in the shadows. 10 years of undercover narcotics work that had taken her deep into the city's most dangerous criminal organizations. Her personnel file read like a highlight reel of successful operations, infiltrating the Riverside Cartel's distribution network, gathering evidence that led to 47 arrests and the seizure of $50 million in drugs and assets. Posing as a money launderer to expose corruption in the city's financial district, resulting in indictments of 3 bank executives and a city councilman. Most recently, a 6-month operation targeting a fentanyl distribution ring that had been responsible for over 200 overdose deaths in the past year. Sarah's success in undercover work stemmed from her chameleon-like ability to become whoever the operation required. One week, she might be a college dropout looking to score drugs for her boyfriend's party. The next, a sophisticated investor seeking to wash dirty money through legitimate businesses. Her appearance helped. Average height, brown hair that could be styled dozens of ways, features that could appear innocent or street-smart, depending on makeup and clothing choices. But beneath the carefully crafted personas lay a woman with extensive tactical training, expert marksmanship skills, and a black belt in Krav Maga earned during off-duty hours at the police academy's training facility. Sarah understood that undercover work was essentially controlled acting, but when the performance ended, she remained a highly trained law enforcement officer capable of handling dangerous situations. The Honda Civic also served as her mobile office, equipped with recording devices, cameras, and communication equipment that looked like standard consumer electronics. The glove compartment contained her service weapon, a Glock 19 that she qualified with every month for 20 years. The center console held backup magazines, zip-tie restraints, and a taser disguised as a phone charger. Riverside City had been experiencing weeks of escalating tensions over the construction of a new police headquarters in the downtown arts district. What began as legitimate community concerns about gentrification and police accountability had gradually attracted outside agitators and professional protesters who specialized in transforming peaceful demonstrations into confrontational media events. Sarah had been monitoring the protest activity through intelligence reports and social media surveillance, noting the arrival of several known troublemakers from other cities. Marcus Thompson, a professional activist who'd been arrested in Portland, Seattle, and Denver for inciting violence during otherwise peaceful protests. Emma Rodriguez and Tyler Walsh, college students whose social media profiles showed them traveling between universities to organize resistance activities funded by shadowy political organizations. The escalation pattern was predictable. Legitimate local activists would organize permitted demonstrations focusing on specific policy issues. Then outside agitators would arrive to push the boundaries, introducing militant rhetoric and confrontational tactics designed to provoke police responses that could be filmed and used for fundraising and recruitment purposes. Tonight, Sarah was returning from what should have been the culmination of 8 months of undercover work. The fentanyl operation had finally concluded with simultaneous raids across the city, resulting in the arrest of 32 suspects and the seizure of enough pure fentanyl to kill every resident of Riverside City twice over. She'd spent the past 16 hours in debriefings, evidence cataloging, and coordination meetings with federal agencies who would be taking over prosecution of the higher-level targets. Exhaustion weighed heavily on her shoulders as she navigated the familiar route home to her apartment in the Riverside Heights district. She'd chosen the location specifically for its proximity to both downtown operations and suburban cover identities, allowing her to transition quickly between her professional and undercover personas. The route home typically took 25 minutes through a mix of commercial and residential areas. Maple Street served as the main arterial connecting downtown to the suburban neighborhoods, a four-lane road lined with small businesses, apartment complexes, and the occasional fast food restaurant. During normal traffic conditions, it was the most efficient path between the police department and her apartment. What Sarah didn't know as she approached the intersection of Maple and 3rd Street was that Marcus Thompson had chosen this exact location for an illegal roadblock designed to trap and intimidate commuters. Unlike the permitted demonstrations that had been taking place in designated areas with police coordination, tonight's action was deliberately confrontational, blocking traffic, forcing interactions with unwilling participants, and creating content for social media distribution. Thompson's strategy relied on catching ordinary citizens off guard, surrounding their vehicles, and pressuring them to make public statements supporting the protesters' political agenda. The tactics were designed to create viral video content showing privileged suburbanites being educated about social justice issues, with financial success measured by online engagement and donation revenue. As Sarah's Honda Civic approached the intersection where her quiet evening commute was about to become a career-defining confrontation, she had no way of knowing that she was driving into a carefully orchestrated trap designed to exploit and intimidate people exactly like the civilian she appeared to be. Sarah's headlights illuminated the makeshift barricade blocking Maple Street 3 blocks ahead of her normal turn toward home. What should have been a quiet residential intersection had been transformed into a militarized checkpoint, complete with overturned shopping carts, orange construction barrels, and at least 2 civilian vehicles positioned diagonally across the roadway to prevent any traffic from passing through. The Justice for All movement had chosen this location strategically. Maple Street served as the primary connector between downtown Riverside City and the suburban neighborhoods where most middle-class residents lived. By blocking this arterial route during the evening commute, they could force maximum confrontation with working people trying to get home after long days, creating perfect opportunities for viral social media content. Marcus Thompson stood at the center of the operation, his tall frame silhouetted against portable floodlights that the protesters had somehow acquired and positioned to illuminate their makeshift command center. At 34, Marcus had turned political activism into a lucrative career, traveling between cities to inject professional organizing tactics into local movements. His social media profiles boasted over 200,000 followers across multiple platforms, and his Patreon account generated enough monthly income to fund his constant travel and expensive equipment. Tonight, Marcus wore his standard uniform for these operations: black tactical pants, an olive drab t-shirt with "Resist" printed in bold letters, and a military-style cap that covered his carefully styled hair. A professional camera crew followed him as he moved between vehicles caught in the blockade, conducting impromptu interviews designed to capture compelling footage for later distribution. Emma Rodriguez and Tyler Walsh flanked Marcus on either side, representing the college contingent that provided enthusiasm and numbers for his operations. Emma, a junior at Riverside University studying social justice advocacy, had met Marcus at a campus recruitment event 3 weeks earlier. Her Instagram account documented her transformation from casual political interest to militant activism, complete with professional photography of her holding protest signs and confronting authority figures. Tyler Walsh brought a different energy to the group. A sophomore studying communications, he specialized in managing the technical aspects of their social media strategy, live streaming confrontations, editing video content for maximum emotional impact, and coordinating online harassment campaigns against anyone who resisted their message. His laptop and portable Wi-Fi hotspot allowed the group to broadcast their activities in real time to audiences hungry for political conflict. The roadblock itself represented weeks of planning and coordination. Unlike the legal demonstrations that required permits, police coordination, and designated protest areas, this guerrilla-style blockade was designed specifically to trap and intimidate unwilling participants. Shopping carts filled with concrete and metal debris created permanent barriers, while smaller obstacles could be moved to allow sympathetic vehicles to pass while stopping others for interrogation. The protesters had established what they called people's checkpoints, interrogation stations where drivers were required to exit their vehicles and make public statements supporting the group's political agenda before being allowed to continue. Those who refused faced escalating pressure tactics, vehicle damage, personal threats, and social media exposure designed to destroy their reputations and employment prospects. As Sarah approached the blockade, she immediately recognized the tactical setup from intelligence briefings about similar operations in other cities. The positioning of cameras, the coordination of personnel, and the strategic use of social media all indicated professional organization rather than spontaneous community activism. This wasn't a local response to local issues. This was imported conflict designed to exploit legitimate community concerns for outside political purposes. Sarah slowed her Honda Civic to a stop about 50 feet from a main barricade, giving herself room to maneuver while assessing the situation. Her years of undercover work had taught her to blend into any environment, and tonight she looked exactly like what the protesters expected to encounter: a tired suburban resident trying to navigate an unexpected obstacle on her way home from work. Her appearance was perfectly calculated for invisibility. Faded jeans, worn sneakers, a baseball cap from a local sports team, and a light jacket that concealed her service weapon while looking completely ordinary. No jewelry, no expensive accessories, nothing that would mark her as either particularly wealthy or particularly poor. Just another face in the urban landscape that her work required her to navigate seamlessly. Marcus Thompson approached her vehicle with practiced confidence, his camera crew trailing behind to capture every moment of the encounter. His megaphone crackled to life as he positioned himself directly in front of her car, preventing any possibility of forward movement while his assistants moved to block potential escape routes. "Good evening," Marcus announced with theatrical authority, his voice amplified to ensure nearby cameras captured every word. "Welcome to a Justice for All checkpoint. Before we can allow you to pass through our community, we need you to make a public statement acknowledging your privilege and denouncing the systemic police brutality that oppresses our people every day." Sarah recognized the technique immediately: forced participation in political theater designed to create compromising video content that could be used for future intimidation or fundraising. The strategy relied on catching ordinary citizens off guard, pressuring them into making statements they would never normally agree to, then using their compliance or resistance as propaganda material. "I just want to get home," Sarah replied calmly, keeping her voice steady and professional despite the growing crowd surrounding her vehicle. "I'm not looking for any kind of political confrontation. Can you please move the barricades so I can continue on my way?" Marcus smiled with predatory satisfaction, recognizing what he interpreted as weakness and privilege. His experience told him that suburban residents confronted with militant activism would either capitulate immediately or become defensive and hostile, both reactions that created excellent content for his social media empire. This is exactly the kind of apathy and entitlement that enables police violence, Marcus declared, gesturing dramatically for the cameras while Emma Rodriguez and Tyler Walsh began positioning themselves at Sarah's side windows to prevent any escape. "You think you can just drive through our community without acknowledging the struggle, without taking a stand against injustice?" The crowd around Sarah's vehicle grew steadily as more protesters abandoned their positions at the barricade to witness what they sensed would be an escalating confrontation. Many held smartphones, live streaming the encounter to their own social media followers while providing commentary designed to inflame the situation further. Sarah maintained her calm exterior while her tactical training assessed the developing threat. She was outnumbered at least 20 to 1, surrounded by increasingly aggressive individuals who believed they were intimidating a helpless civilian. Her concealed service weapon provided some security, but drawing it would instantly escalate the situation beyond any hope of peaceful resolution. More importantly, every moment of this encounter was being recorded by multiple cameras, creating potential evidence that could be invaluable for future prosecutions. The protesters' own documentation of their illegal activities was building a comprehensive case against them, if she could maintain her cover long enough to gather sufficient evidence of their criminal behavior. The crowd's energy shifted perceptibly as Sarah's polite refusal to participate in their political theater registered as defiance rather than simple desire to avoid confrontation. Marcus Thompson's practiced smile hardened into something more predatory as he recognized an opportunity to demonstrate his power before his online audience. "Ladies and gentlemen," Marcus announced into his megaphone while gesturing towards Sarah's vehicle. "We have here a perfect example of privileged white complicity with systemic oppression. This woman thinks she can simply ignore the struggle for justice because it's inconvenient for her comfortable suburban lifestyle." Emma Rodriguez immediately understood her role in the performance, pulling out her smartphone to begin live streaming while positioning herself at Sarah's driver's side window. Her voice carried the rehearsed passion of someone who had practiced this routine multiple times before. "This is exactly what white privilege looks like," Emma declared for a growing online audience. When confronted with the reality of police brutality and institutional racism, privileged people like this woman just want to drive through our communities without acknowledging our pain or taking responsibility for their complicity in our oppression. Tyler Walsh coordinated the technical aspects of their multi-platform broadcast, managing laptop computers that streamed the confrontation simultaneously to Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, and Facebook. His commentary provided real-time analysis designed to inflame his viewers' emotions and encourage more aggressive tactics. "Look at her sitting there in her fancy car, probably coming home from some corporate job where she profits off the labor of oppressed communities," Tyler narrated while zooming his camera on Sarah's face through the windshield. "She thinks she's better than us. She thinks our fight for justice is just an inconvenience she can ignore." The digital audience responded predictably to the inflammatory rhetoric. Comments flooded the live streams demanding escalation, with viewers from across the country encouraging the protesters to make her pay for her perceived arrogance and privilege. The online mob mentality amplified the physical confrontation as protesters began playing to their remote audience rather than focusing on any legitimate local concerns. Sarah watched the situation deteriorate with the detached professionalism that 20 years of law enforcement experience had taught her. She recognized the patterns of manufactured outrage, the coordinated messaging designed to justify whatever escalation would follow, and the careful positioning of cameras to capture only specific angles of the developing confrontation. What the protesters didn't realize was that Sarah's own recording equipment was documenting every word, every gesture, and every tactical decision they made. Her phone, positioned discreetly on the dashboard, captured crystal-clear audio and video of their threats and intimidation tactics. More importantly, their own live streams were creating permanent, time-stamped evidence of their criminal behavior that no defense attorney would be able to explain away. "I understand you're passionate about your cause," Sarah replied calmly, keeping her voice steady despite the growing hostility surrounding her vehicle. "But I'm just trying to get home after a long day at work. I'm not your enemy, and I'm not trying to make any kind of political statement. Can we please resolve this peacefully?" Her reasonable tone and professional demeanor only seemed to enrage the crowd further. Marcus Thompson had built his career on provoking exactly these kinds of reactions. Reasonable people trying to de-escalate situations that he had deliberately designed to be inflammatory and confrontational. "Peaceful?" Marcus laughed mockingly into his megaphone. "There's nothing peaceful about the violence that your silence enables. Every day you go about your comfortable life without fighting injustice. You're complicit in the murder of innocent black and brown bodies by your precious police." Emma Rodriguez pressed her face closer to Sarah's window, her phone camera capturing every micro-expression while she delivered increasingly personal attacks designed to provoke an emotional response that could be exploited for content. "Look at her trying to play innocent," Emma sneered for her online audience. This is exactly how white supremacy operates, through passive aggression and fake politeness while supporting systems that literally murder our people. She probably votes for politicians who fund police departments instead of schools and healthcare. Tyler Walsh began directing other protesters to surround Sarah's vehicle more completely, creating a human barrier that prevented any possibility of escape while ensuring that multiple camera angles captured every moment of her increasing isolation and vulnerability. The crowd had grown to nearly 40 people, many of whom were drawn by the excitement of the confrontation rather than any genuine political conviction. Several wore masks that concealed their identities while they participated in what was rapidly becoming criminal harassment and unlawful imprisonment. Sarah noticed that many of the more aggressive protesters carried crowbars, baseball bats, and other improvised weapons that they had disguised as protest signs or artistic props. The careful positioning of these weapons suggested coordination and planning rather than spontaneous emotional response. One protester, a young man with face tattoos and gang colors visible beneath his political slogans, began walking slowly around Sarah's vehicle while trailing a key along the paint, creating deliberate scratches that would require expensive repairs. His actions were clearly visible to the livestream cameras, but none of the organizers made any attempt to stop the property destruction. "Maybe she needs a more direct message about the consequences of complicity," the tattooed protester suggested loudly enough for the cameras to capture his words. Sometimes privileged people need to experience a little discomfort before they understand what oppression really feels like. Marcus Thompson's response was carefully calibrated to maintain plausible deniability while encouraging escalation. Rather than explicitly ordering violence, he created permission structures that allowed others to act while protecting himself from direct legal responsibility. "The people have every right to express their anger about systemic injustice," Marcus declared for his audience. "If privileged individuals choose to drive through our communities while ignoring our struggle, they shouldn't be surprised when the community responds with the same energy they show us every day." Sarah recognized the deliberate ambiguity of Marcus's language, inflammatory enough to encourage violence, while vague enough to provide legal cover later. His experience in multiple cities had taught him exactly how to walk the line between free speech and criminal incitement. The crowd began chanting slogans that grew progressively more threatening as their collective adrenaline built toward inevitable violence. What had begun as political theater was transforming into something far more dangerous, and Sarah realized that her window for peaceful resolution was rapidly closing. Emma Rodriguez suddenly grabbed Sarah's door handle and began yanking violently, testing whether the vehicle was locked while screaming accusations of racism and complicity. When the door remained secure, she began pounding on the window with her fists while encouraging others to help her force entry. "She's probably calling the cops right now," Emma shouted over the crowd noise. "We can't let her escape before she learns what justice really means. Someone needs to teach her that she can't just ignore our community when it's convenient for her." Tyler Walsh stepped forward with a theatrical flourish, pulling a metal key from his pocket and holding it up for the cameras like a trophy. His livestream audience had been demanding more aggressive action, and he understood that property destruction would generate the viral content that translated into donations and social media followers. "If she won't respect our community," Tyler announced to his phone camera while walking deliberately towards Sarah's Honda Civic, "maybe she'll respect some consequences for her complicity in oppression." The key scraped against the paint with a metallic shriek that seemed to energize the crowd. Tyler moved methodically along the passenger side of the vehicle, carving deep gouges into the gray paint while providing running commentary for his online audience about the symbolic importance of attacking the property of those who support systemic racism. Sarah watched the deliberate vandalism with professional detachment, her phone camera capturing every moment of Tyler's criminal behavior. Each scratch represented felony property damage, and his live-stream confession provided prosecutors with perfect evidence of criminal intent. He was literally documenting his own crimes while broadcasting them to thousands of witnesses. Emma Rodriguez joined the property destruction with obvious enthusiasm, using her keys to scratch "racist" into the hood of Sarah's car while her followers cheered her on through live-stream comments. Her political science classes had taught her about civil disobedience, but her professors had failed to explain the difference between symbolic protest and criminal vandalism. "This is what happens when privilege meets accountability," Emma declared while continuing to damage the vehicle. "She thinks she can just drive through our community without consequences, but we're going to teach her that ignoring injustice has a price." The crowd grew bolder as property destruction escalated without any apparent response from law enforcement. Several protesters began kicking the sides of Sarah's car, leaving dents and scratches while chanting slogans about police brutality and systemic oppression. Their political rhetoric provided psychological justification for increasingly criminal behavior. Marcus Thompson positioned himself strategically to capture the destruction on his professional camera equipment, while maintaining enough distance to claim later that he hadn't personally participated in any illegal activities. His experience in multiple cities had taught him exactly how to incite violence while protecting himself from criminal liability. "The people are expressing their righteous anger," Marcus narrated for his audience while protesters continued vandalizing Sarah's vehicle. "When a system refuses to provide justice through official channels, the community has every right to take direct action against those who enable oppression through their silence and complicity." One protester produced a crowbar from beneath a protest banner, raising it above his head while approaching Sarah's rear windshield. The crowd cheered as he prepared to smash the glass, their collective bloodlust overwhelming any remaining pretense of peaceful political expression. Sarah faced a critical decision point. Her training and legal authority as a police officer gave her multiple options for responding to the escalating criminal assault, but revealing her identity prematurely might allow the perpetrators to claim entrapment or excessive force. Her undercover instincts told her to gather more evidence, but her survival instincts warned that the situation was approaching life-threatening violence. The protester with the crowbar hesitated for a moment, perhaps recognizing that destroying the windshield would cross a line from property damage into something approaching attempted murder. But the online audience was demanding escalation, and the mob energy had reached a tipping point where rational decision-making was rapidly disappearing. "Do it!" Emma Rodriguez screamed, her live-stream comments flooding with encouragement from viewers across the country who were living vicariously through the violence they were witnessing. "Show her what happens when privileged people ignore our struggle." Tyler Walsh moved to the driver's side mirror, grabbing it with both hands and twisting until the mounting bracket snapped, leaving the mirror dangling by its electrical wires. He held the broken mirror up for his camera, like a conquistador displaying a trophy, while his audience celebrated the destruction with donations and encouraging messages. The financial incentive structure of social media activism had created a perverse feedback loop where more extreme behavior generated more online engagement, which translated into more money through donations, sponsorships, and platform revenue sharing. Violence had become a profitable business model disguised as political activism. Sarah's vehicle rocked violently as multiple protesters began pushing against it from different sides, testing whether they could flip it over while she remained trapped inside. The mechanical stress on the suspension and tires created ominous creaking sounds that suggested the Honda Civic was approaching its structural limits. "She's probably calling the cops right now," one mass protester shouted while pounding on Sarah's side window with what appeared to be a metal pipe. "We need to finish this before they show up and protect their privileged friend." Marcus Thompson's megaphone crackled back to life as he sensed the crowd was ready for his most inflammatory rhetoric yet. His years of experience had taught him exactly when to escalate his language to push angry people over the edge into uncontrolled violence. "This woman represents everything wrong with our society," Marcus declared with practiced passion. "She sits in her comfortable car, ignoring the suffering of oppressed communities probably texting her friends about how inconvenient our fight for justice is for her evening commute. Maybe it's time she experienced some of the fear and vulnerability that our people live with every single day. The permission structure was now complete. Marcus had provided ideological justification. Emma and Tyler had demonstrated that property destruction was acceptable, and the online audience was demanding escalation. The mob was primed for violence, and Sarah realized that maintaining her cover much longer might result in serious injury or death. A protester appeared at her passenger window with a baseball bat, testing his swing while grinning at the cameras. His face was partially concealed by a bandana, but his movements suggested familiarity with violence that went beyond political activism. Several other protesters carried similar weapons that they had disguised as protest props until the moment came to use them. The crowd began chanting, "Get her out! Get her out!" while pressing closer to the vehicle from all sides. The human wall surrounding Sarah's car was now completely impermeable, eliminating any possibility of escape, even if she revealed her identity and attempted to arrest the ringleaders. Sarah's phone continued recording everything while she maintained outward calm despite the escalating danger. Every threat, every act of vandalism, and every incitement to violence was being documented in multiple formats by multiple cameras. The protesters' own social media strategy was creating an evidentiary goldmine that would make prosecution virtually automatic once her identity was revealed. But first, she had to survive the next few minutes as the mob's restraint collapsed entirely and political theater transformed into attempted murder. The moment that changed everything came when Marcus Thompson decided to personally escalate the confrontation beyond property damage into direct physical assault. His years of professional activism had taught him that viral moments require dramatic action, and his online audience was demanding blood. Marcus approached Sarah's driver's side door with theatrical confidence, his camera crew positioning themselves to capture what he intended to be the climactic moment of the evening's performance. The crowd sensed the approaching crescendo and pressed closer, their collective energy focused on the woman they believed to be a helpless suburban victim. Time for some direct education about privilege and consequences, Marcus announced into his megaphone while reaching for Sarah's door handle. His tone carried the predatory satisfaction of someone who had successfully orchestrated dozens of similar confrontations across multiple cities. The door handle clicked as Marcus tested it, finding the vehicle locked as expected. But rather than accepting this barrier, he began yanking violently on the handle while instructing other protesters to check the other doors and windows for potential entry points. "She's locked herself in like the coward she is," Marcus declared for his audience. "But we're going to drag her out here and make her face the community she's been ignoring. She's going to learn what accountability looks like." Emma Rodriguez and Tyler Walsh immediately understood their roles in the escalating performance. Emma positioned herself at the passenger door, while Tyler moved to the rear door, both testing handles and attempting to force entry while maintaining constant commentary for their live streams. "She can't hide in there forever," Emma shouted while pounding on the passenger window with increasing violence. "We're going to get her out and make her answer for her complicity in our oppression. She's going to face justice whether she wants to or not." The crowd's energy reached a fever pitch as multiple protesters began rocking the vehicle more violently, attempting to flip it over or at least disorient the occupant enough to facilitate forced entry. The Honda Civic's suspension groaned under the coordinated assault while its tires scraped against the pavement. Marcus Thompson's rhetoric escalated beyond political theater into explicit threats of sexual violence, his megaphone amplifying words that would constitute clear criminal charges once proper authorities reviewed the extensive video documentation the protesters were creating. Maybe this privileged princess needs to experience some of the vulnerability that our women face every day, Marcus suggested with obvious malicious intent. Maybe she needs to understand what it feels like to be powerless and afraid. The explicit sexual threat was the line that Sarah's professional training would not allow her to cross. 20 years of law enforcement experience had taught her exactly when verbal intimidation transformed into credible threats of imminent violence. And Marcus Thompson had just crossed that threshold definitively. Sarah's hand moved smoothly to her concealed service weapon, while her other hand reached for her badge. The muscle memory of thousands of hours of training taking over as she prepared to end her undercover role and assert her legal authority. But Marcus Thompson wasn't finished with his performance. Emboldened by what he interpreted as successful intimidation, he grabbed the door handle with both hands and began yanking with enough force to damage the locking mechanism while describing in graphic detail what he intended to do once he gained access to the vehicle. The moment Marcus Thompson successfully forced the door open and reached inside to grab Sarah by the arm was the precise moment that Detective Sarah Martinez decided to reveal exactly who he was assaulting. Sarah's movements were fluid and professional as she simultaneously displayed her badge and drew her service weapon. The 20-year veteran's training evident in the smooth coordination of actions that transformed her from apparent victim to armed law enforcement officer in less than 2 seconds. Metro Police Department, Sarah announced in a clear, authoritative voice that cut through the crowd noise like a blade. Detective Sarah Martinez, badge number 2847. You are all under arrest for assault on a police officer, destruction of police property, and conspiracy to commit kidnapping. The effect on the crowd was instantaneous and dramatic. The protesters who had been pressing closest to the vehicle immediately stumbled backward, as if struck by an invisible force, their faces registering shock, disbelief, and rapidly dawning terror as they realized the magnitude of their mistake. Marcus Thompson's grip on Sarah's arm released, as if he had grabbed a live electrical wire. His confident expression transformed into something approaching panic as his mind processed the implications of what had just occurred. Every word he had spoken, every threat he had made, every instruction he had given had been recorded by multiple cameras and broadcast live to thousands of witnesses. Emma Rodriguez's live stream captured the exact moment of recognition, her camera phone shaking as her hands began trembling uncontrollably. The comments section of her stream exploded with viewers realizing they had just witnessed the documentation of multiple felonies being committed against a police officer in real time. "Oh God! Oh God! Oh God!" Emma whispered repeatedly as the reality of her situation sank in. Her political science professors had never mentioned that assaulting police officers carried mandatory minimum sentences that could destroy her academic career and future employment prospects. Tyler Walsh's technical expertise with social media suddenly became a liability as he realized that his carefully orchestrated multi-platform documentation had created a permanent, time-stamped record of criminal conspiracy that no defense attorney would be able to explain away or dismiss. The crowd began backing away from Sarah's vehicle as word spread through the group that they had been attacking a police officer. Many protesters immediately began removing masks and attempting to delete incriminating content from their phones, not realizing that live stream material had already been archived on multiple platforms. "This is entrapment," Marcus Thompson shouted desperately, his years of legal experience in other cities providing him with the only defense strategy he could conceive. "You were engaged in illegal surveillance. We had every right to defend ourselves." Sarah remained calm and professional despite the adrenaline coursing through her system. Her weapon remained drawn, but pointed safely downward as she began the process of transforming a chaotic situation into an organized crime scene. "Mr. Thompson," Sarah replied with icy precision, "I was driving home from work when you and your associates illegally blocked my route, damaged my vehicle, threatened me with sexual assault, and attempted to kidnap me. Every action you took was recorded by your own cameras and broadcast live to thousands of witnesses." The trap that Marcus Thompson had set for what he believed was an innocent civilian had become a trap for himself and his followers, with their own social media strategy providing law enforcement with perfect documentation of their criminal behavior. The distinctive wail of police sirens began as distant background noise, but rapidly grew louder as multiple units responded to Sarah's emergency signal. The protesters who moments earlier had been confident in their numbers and aggressive tactics now found themselves trapped in their own illegal roadblock as marked patrol cars approached from multiple directions. Sarah had activated her emergency beacon the moment she drew her weapon, a silent signal that brought immediate response from every available unit in the district. Her 20 years of service had earned her the kind of respect that made officer safety calls involving Detective Martinez an absolute priority for the entire department. Marcus Thompson's expression shifted rapidly between panic and calculation as he realized that his professional activism career was about to collide with the criminal justice system in ways that his previous arrests had never prepared him for. His experience in Portland, Seattle, and Denver had involved minor charges that liberal prosecutors often dismissed, but assaulting a police officer was a different category of criminal behavior entirely. "Everyone stay calm," Marcus announced through his megaphone, though his own voice betrayed the fear he was trying to conceal. "We have done nothing wrong here. This is clearly an entrapment situation designed to suppress our First Amendment rights to peaceful protest." Emma Rodriguez's live stream continued broadcasting to her followers, but the comments section had transformed from encouragement to horror as viewers realized they were watching their ideological heroes face serious criminal charges. Many began advising her to stop recording and delete the evidence, not understanding that live stream content was automatically archived and could not be eliminated. Tyler Walsh frantically attempted to shut down his multi-platform broadcast setup, but the technical complexity that had made him valuable to the movement now worked against him. Each platform required separate shutdown procedures, and his panic was making simple tasks impossible to execute correctly. The first patrol car arrived with Officer Ramirez behind the wheel, the same veteran cop who had responded to Sarah's previous trespassing call at a ranch. His familiarity with Detective Martinez's reputation meant he understood immediately that this was not a routine crowd control situation. "Detective Martinez, are you injured?" Officer Ramirez called out as he exited his patrol car with his weapon drawn, but pointed safely downward. His professional demeanor and obvious respect for Sarah sent a clear message to the surrounding protesters about exactly who they had been assaulting. "Negative on injuries, but I need you to secure the perimeter," Sarah replied with calm authority. "We have approximately 40 suspects who need to be processed for assault on a police officer, destruction of police property, conspiracy, and unlawful imprisonment. The ringleaders are Marcus Thompson, Emma Rodriguez, and Tyler Walsh." Additional patrol cars arrived in rapid succession, their red and blue lights transforming the illegal roadblock into an official crime scene. Officers immediately began establishing a secure perimeter around the protesters, preventing any escape while maintaining safety protocols for handling large crowds. Detective James Liu, Sarah's longtime partner in the narcotics division, arrived in an unmarked vehicle and quickly assessed the situation. His experience working with Sarah had taught him to trust her tactical judgment completely, and the evidence of violence was immediately obvious from the damaged Honda Civic. "Sarah, what's our situation here?" Detective Liu asked while positioning himself to provide backup coverage. His presence added another layer of law enforcement credibility to Sarah's account of the events. "I was driving home from the fentanyl operation when these individuals illegally blocked the road and began assaulting me," Sarah explained while keeping her weapon ready, but not directly threatening any specific protester. "They damaged the vehicle, made explicit threats of sexual violence, and attempted to kidnap me while live streaming the entire incident to thousands of witnesses." The crowd of protesters began to fragment as individuals realized that collective action was no longer protecting them from individual criminal liability. Several attempted to blend into the darkness beyond the roadblock, but the arriving officers quickly established a perimeter that prevented any escape. Marcus Thompson made one final attempt to control the narrative, raising his megaphone to address the gathering crowd of law enforcement officers. His years of experience dealing with police had taught him that confident rhetoric could sometimes create doubt about the legitimacy of arrests. "Officers, you are witnessing a clear case of police entrapment and excessive force," Marcus declared with as much authority as he could muster. "This detective was conducting illegal surveillance of our peaceful demonstration, and we were simply exercising our constitutional rights to free speech and assembly. Detective Liu responded to Marcus's claims with the kind of professional dismissal that comes from years of hearing similar arguments from criminal defendants. His examination of Sarah's damaged vehicle provided immediate evidence that contradicted any claims of peaceful demonstration. "Mr. Thompson, I can see multiple acts of vandalism on Detective Martinez's vehicle, and we have your own live-stream documentation of threats and attempted forced entry," Detective Liu stated matter-of-factly. "Your constitutional rights don't include assaulting police officers or destroying government property." Officer Ramirez began the process of separating and identifying individual protesters, starting with those who appeared in the live-stream footage committing specific criminal acts. The protesters' own social media documentation made identification and evidence gathering remarkably straightforward. Emma Rodriguez finally stopped her live stream as she realized that continuing to broadcast was only creating additional evidence against her. Her followers' comments had shifted from support to advice about hiring criminal defense attorneys, a transformation that highlighted the serious legal jeopardy she now faced. Tyler Walsh's technical equipment became evidence as officers began collecting the laptops and cameras that had been used to coordinate and document the illegal activities. His expertise in social media management had created a comprehensive digital trail that prosecutors would find invaluable. The irony was not lost on Sarah that the protesters' sophisticated social media strategy had become the instrument of their own destruction. Every threat, every act of vandalism, and every moment of conspiracy had been carefully documented and broadcast to thousands of witnesses, creating an evidentiary package that defense attorneys would find impossible to dispute. Sergeant Patricia Williams arrived to supervise the scene and coordinate with Detective Martinez about processing procedures. Her experience with crowd control situations had taught her the importance of proper documentation and evidence preservation, especially in cases involving assault on law enforcement. "Detective Martinez, I need you to walk me through the sequence of events for my report," Sergeant Williams requested while surveying the damaged vehicle and scattered protest equipment. "This looks like it's going to be a significant case, and I want to make sure we document everything properly." As more patrol cars arrived and the crime scene expanded to encompass the entire illegal roadblock, the protesters who had confidently assaulted what they believed was a helpless civilian found themselves facing the full weight of the criminal justice system, with their own recorded confessions providing the evidence for their prosecution. The Riverside County District Attorney's Office had never received a criminal case with such comprehensive video documentation. Assistant District Attorney Michael Chun spent 3 days reviewing the evidence package that Detective Martinez had assembled, marveling at how the defendants had essentially prosecuted themselves through their own social media activities. "In 20 years of prosecution, I've never seen anything like this," Chun told his supervisor while displaying the synchronized video feeds from multiple angles. They live-streamed their own conspiracy, documented their own criminal intent, and broadcast their confessions to thousands of witnesses. It's like they wanted to be convicted. The evidence package included Marcus Thompson's live stream showing him explicitly threatening sexual assault while forcing entry into Sarah's vehicle, Emma Rodriguez's Instagram feed documenting her destruction of police property while explaining her political motivations, and Tyler Walsh's multi-platform broadcast coordinating the criminal activity in real time. Sarah worked closely with the prosecutor's office to build individual cases against each participant based on their specific criminal actions. Her experience with complex undercover investigations had taught her the importance of connecting evidence to individual defendants rather than relying on broad conspiracy charges that defense attorneys could more easily dispute. Marcus Thompson faced the most serious charges as the primary organizer and instigator: assault on a police officer, attempted kidnapping, destruction of government property, conspiracy to commit violence, and inciting riot carried potential sentences that would effectively end his professional activism career permanently. His criminal defense attorney, David Rawlings, attempted to argue that Thompson's actions constituted protected political speech under the First Amendment. The strategy collapsed immediately when prosecutors played video footage of Thompson explicitly threatening to sexually assault Detective Martinez while physically attacking her vehicle. Your Honor, Mr. Thompson's own words contradict any claim that this was peaceful political expression, Prosecutor Chen argued during the preliminary hearing. He stated on camera that he intended to drag Detective Martinez from her vehicle and make her experience vulnerability, which in context clearly refers to sexual assault. Emma Rodriguez and Tyler Walsh faced charges as co-conspirators and active participants in the assault. Their youth and college student status generated some initial sympathy, but the video evidence of their enthusiastic participation in criminal activity eliminated any possibility of claiming they were unwitting followers. Rodriguez's parents hired an expensive criminal defense firm, but their attorney quickly advised them that the evidence was overwhelming and that negotiating a plea bargain was their daughter's only realistic option. Her live-streamed commentary, while vandalizing police property, had created an unbreakable connection between her identity and criminal intent. Tyler Walsh's technical expertise became a liability when digital forensics experts analyzed his equipment and discovered evidence of similar operations in other cities. His role as a professional social media coordinator for illegal activities elevated his charges to include racketeering and conspiracy across state lines. The investigation revealed the broader network of professional protesters who traveled between cities to escalate peaceful demonstrations into violent confrontations. Marcus Thompson was receiving payment from multiple political organizations to create conflict and generate fundraising opportunities through manufactured outrage. Detective Martinez's background investigation uncovered financial records showing payments totaling over $200,000 in the past year to Thompson and his associates for community organizing activities. The money trail connected to dark money political groups that specialized in creating chaos for electoral advantage. Emma Rodriguez faced disciplinary action from Riverside University after the criminal charges became public. The university's Student Conduct Office determined that her participation in assaulting a police officer violated multiple provisions of the Student Code of Conduct and academic integrity standards. Her academic advisor explained that criminal convictions involving moral turpitude would prevent her from pursuing graduate school or careers in education, social work, or public service. The momentary decision to participate in Thompson's illegal activities had effectively destroyed her planned career path. Tyler Walsh lost his part-time job at a local technology company when his employer learned about his arrest for assaulting a police officer. His manager explained that the company could not employ someone whose criminal behavior had been broadcast to thousands of viewers, creating a public relations liability. The financial consequences extended far beyond immediate legal fees. The protesters faced restitution costs for the damage to Detective Martinez's vehicle, which included not only bodywork and paint, but also specialized law enforcement equipment that had been damaged during the assault. Insurance companies denied coverage for the criminal acts, leaving the defendants personally liable for thousands of dollars in damages. Many discovered that their parent homeowners' policies specifically excluded coverage for intentional criminal behavior, forcing families to choose between financial ruin and disowning their adult children. Background check companies immediately flagged the criminal charges, making future employment difficult even before convictions were finalized. Several protesters lost job opportunities when potential employers discovered their involvement in assaulting a police officer through routine screening procedures. The case attracted attention from law enforcement agencies across the country as an example of how professional protesters coordinated illegal activities while maintaining plausible deniability. Detective Martinez was invited to speak at training conferences about evidence-gathering techniques and undercover officer safety. Marcus Thompson's previous arrests in other cities were re-examined in light of the comprehensive evidence from Riverside County. Prosecutors in Portland, Seattle, and Denver reopened cases where similar tactics have been used, but evidence had been insufficient for serious charges. The pattern revealed a sophisticated operation where Thompson would arrive in cities with existing political tensions, escalate peaceful demonstrations into violent confrontations, document the conflict for fundraising purposes, then move to the next location before facing serious legal consequences. Federal investigators began examining the funding sources for Thompson's network, discovering connections to organizations that specialized in election interference through manufactured social unrest. The seemingly local protest in Riverside City was part of a national strategy to create chaos and undermine confidence in law enforcement. Emma Rodriguez's psychology professor required her to write a research paper analyzing her own decision-making process as a case study in group psychology and social media manipulation. The assignment forced her to confront how she had been used as an unwitting participant in someone else's criminal enterprise. Tyler Walsh's computer science skills led to a cooperation agreement with federal investigators who needed technical expertise to trace the digital networks used by professional protest organizations. His insider knowledge of the social media coordination tactics became valuable to law enforcement agencies investigating similar groups. The local community response was divided between those who supported legitimate peaceful protest and those who recognized that the defendants had crossed clear legal boundaries into criminal behavior. Many genuine reform advocates distanced themselves from the violent tactics that had discredited their cause. Detective Martinez received commendations from both the police department and the district attorney's office for her professional handling of a dangerous situation and her successful evidence gathering that enabled comprehensive prosecution of the criminal network. Detective Martinez's investigation into Marcus Thompson's background revealed connections that extended far beyond local political activism into a sophisticated network of organizations that specialized in manufacturing civil unrest for political and financial gain. Her 20 years of experience with complex criminal enterprises had prepared her to follow money trails and organizational structures that less experienced investigators might have missed. The financial records subpoenaed from Thompson's bank accounts showed regular payments from a web of nonprofit organizations with innocuous names like Communities for Justice, Democratic Action Network, and Progressive Policy Institute. Each organization received funding from larger groups, creating layers of financial insulation designed to obscure the ultimate sources of the money. Sarah's analysis of Thompson's travel patterns revealed a systematic approach to his activism. He would arrive in cities during periods of existing political tension, establish relationships with local activists through social media and campus recruitment, then escalate peaceful demonstrations into violent confrontations that generated extensive media coverage and online fundraising opportunities. The pattern was consistent across Portland, Seattle, Denver, and now Riverside City. Thompson would spend 2 to 3 weeks in each location, identify the most radical local activists, provide them with tactical training and equipment, then organize illegal activities that resulted in arrests and media attention, while he remained positioned to avoid serious criminal liability. Federal investigators from the FBI's Domestic Terrorism Unit contacted Detective Martinez after reading her reports about Thompson's network. Agent Rebecca Foster explained that similar operations have been identified in over 30 cities during the past 2 years, suggesting coordination at a national level. What you've uncovered in Riverside City appears to be part of a much larger operation, Agent Foster told Sarah during their first coordination meeting. We have evidence of the same funding sources and tactical approaches being used to create civil unrest in cities with important elections or vulnerable law enforcement budgets. The investigation expanded to include digital forensics analysis of Tyler Walsh's equipment, which contained detailed records of social media coordination activities across multiple states. His role as a technical specialist had given him access to the operational details of the entire network, making his cooperation invaluable to federal investigators. Walsh's computers revealed encrypted communications between professional protesters operating in different cities, sharing tactical information about police response times, media contact strategies, and legal defense coordination. The network operated with the sophistication of a criminal enterprise, complete with operational security measures and financial management systems. Emma Rodriguez's involvement appeared to be more typical of the college students who were recruited as unwitting participants in the professional operation. Her social media history showed gradual radicalization over several months as she was exposed to increasingly extreme political content and encouraged to participate in escalating activities. The recruitment strategy targeted idealistic young people who were genuinely concerned about social justice issues, but lacked the experience to recognize when their legitimate political activities were being manipulated for other purposes. Campus organizers like Rodriguez provided local credibility and numbers, while professional activists like Thompson controlled the strategic direction. Detective Martinez's case became a landmark prosecution that demonstrated how traditional law enforcement techniques could be adapted to address modern forms of political violence that exploited social media and nonprofit funding structures. Her evidence gathering had created a template that other agencies could use to investigate similar networks. The legal precedent established by the Riverside City prosecutions was significant because it demonstrated that political motivation did not provide immunity from criminal charges for assault, vandalism, and conspiracy. The extensive video documentation made it impossible for defendants to claim they were engaging in protected First Amendment activities. Defense attorneys' attempts to argue that the protesters were exercising legitimate civil disobedience failed when prosecutors demonstrated that civil disobedience traditionally involved accepting legal consequences for symbolic violations of unjust laws, not live-streaming criminal assaults for profit and entertainment. The case attracted attention from constitutional law experts who noted that the defendants' own documentation of their criminal intent eliminated any possibility of claiming that their actions were protected political speech. Professor David Hartwell of Riverside University Law School explained the distinction in a widely quoted legal analysis. Civil disobedience has historically involved deliberate, peaceful violation of specific laws to highlight their injustice, with participants willingly accepting arrest and prosecution, Professor Hartwell wrote. These defendants were not protesting unjust laws. They were committing crimes while using political rhetoric to justify criminal behavior. The community impact of the investigation extended beyond the immediate prosecutions to broader questions about the relationship between legitimate political activism and criminal behavior disguised as social justice advocacy. Many genuine reform advocates expressed relief that the criminal elements had been exposed and prosecuted. Local activist organizations that had been infiltrated by Thompson's network began implementing screening procedures to prevent future exploitation by professional agitators. The experience had taught them the importance of distinguishing between authentic grassroots organizing and manufactured conflict designed to discredit their cause. Media coverage of the investigation revealed the sophisticated propaganda techniques used by the professional protest network. Thompson's operation included professional video production, coordinated social media campaigns, and strategic media outreach designed to control narrative framing and maximize fundraising opportunities. The revelation that much of what appeared to be authentic local activism was actually coordinated by outside professionals with financial motivations caused many community members to reassess their understanding of recent political events. The manufactured nature of the conflict became clear once the funding sources and organizational structures were exposed. Detective Martinez testified before a congressional subcommittee investigating domestic terrorism funding, sharing her findings about how legitimate nonprofit structures were being exploited to fund criminal activities. Her expertise in financial investigations proved valuable for understanding the money flows that enabled the professional protest network. The investigation led to reforms in nonprofit oversight and reporting requirements, making it more difficult for organizations to hide their funding sources and activities behind layers of bureaucratic complexity. The Riverside City case became a model for how law enforcement could trace financial networks that supported domestic terrorism. Sarah's work also contributed to improved training for law enforcement officers who might encounter similar operations. Her techniques for evidence gathering during undercover situations and her analysis of social media coordination tactics became part of standard training curricula for departments across the country. The broader investigation revealed that the professional protest network was part of a larger ecosystem of political organizations that specialized in manufacturing conflict and chaos for electoral advantage. The goal was not to achieve specific policy reforms, but to create instability that could be exploited for partisan political purposes. Federal charges against Thompson and his associates were filed under racketeering statutes that recognize their activities as an ongoing criminal enterprise rather than isolated incidents of political activism. The prosecutions sent a clear message that criminal behavior would not be protected by claims of political motivation. The Riverside County Superior Court had never hosted a criminal trial with such extensive media coverage and public interest. Judge Patricia Nakamura presided over proceedings that attracted national attention as a test case for how the justice system would handle politically motivated violence in the social media age. Marcus Thompson's trial began on a gray Monday morning in October, 6 months after his arrest outside Detective Martinez's vehicle. His defense attorney, David Rawlings, had spent those months attempting to construct a narrative that would justify his client's criminal behavior through claims of political necessity and police misconduct. The prosecution's opening statement was delivered by Assistant District Attorney Michael Chun, who methodically walked the jury through the sequence of events using the defendant's own video documentation. The courtroom's large screen displayed synchronized footage from multiple angles showing Thompson's escalating threats and ultimate assault on Detective Martinez. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, Chun began while displaying Thompson's live stream on the courtroom monitors. You will see and hear the defendant, in his own words, threatening to sexually assault a police officer while attempting to drag her from her vehicle. These are not the actions of a peaceful political protester. These are the actions of a violent criminal who used political rhetoric to justify assault and attempted kidnapping. Rawlings attempted to counter with arguments about systemic oppression and the moral justification for civil disobedience. But his strategy collapsed when confronted with video evidence of his client explicitly threatening sexual violence while physically attacking Detective Martinez's vehicle. Your Honor, Rawlings argued during his opening statement, my client was exercising his fundamental right to protest injustice. Detective Martinez was conducting illegal surveillance of a peaceful demonstration, and the community had every right to demand accountability from law enforcement. The prosecution's response was swift and devastating. Chun played audio recordings of Thompson threatening to make Detective Martinez experience vulnerability, while describing in graphic detail what he intended to do once he gained access to her vehicle. The explicit sexual threats eliminated any possibility of claiming peaceful protest. Detective Martinez took the witness stand on the second day of trial, her professional demeanor and clear testimony contrasting sharply with the defense's attempts to portray her as an aggressive provocateur. Her 20 years of law enforcement experience was evident in her calm, factual responses to both prosecution and defense questions. I was driving home from a successful undercover operation when I encountered the illegal roadblock, Sarah testified while reviewing the timeline of events. I attempted to navigate around the obstruction peacefully, but Mr. Thompson and his associates that surrounded my vehicle threatened me with sexual assault, damaged my car, and attempted to kidnap me. Rawlings's cross-examination strategy focused on trying to establish that Sarah had been conducting improper surveillance of the protesters, but his questions only reinforced the prosecution's case by highlighting the extensive criminal behavior that had been documented by the defendants themselves. Detective Martinez, isn't it true that you were secretly recording the protesters without their knowledge? Rawlings asked, apparently unaware that this line of questioning would backfire spectacularly. Mr. Rawlings, Sarah replied with professional composure, I was recording evidence of crimes being committed against me, which is both legal and appropriate. More importantly, your client was live streaming the entire assault to thousands of viewers, so there was nothing secret about the documentation of his criminal behavior. The jury's reaction to the video evidence was immediately apparent. Several jurors visibly recoiled when Thompson's threats of sexual violence were played in the courtroom, and others shook their heads in disbelief as they watched him coordinate the destruction of Sarah's vehicle while providing running commentary for his online audience. Emma Rodriguez's separate trial proceeded simultaneously in another courtroom, where her defense attorney attempted to portray her as a naive college student who had been manipulated by professional agitators. The strategy might have been more effective if not for the extensive video evidence of her enthusiastic participation in vandalizing police property. Rodriguez's own Instagram posts were entered as evidence, showing her progression from casual political interest to militant activism under Thompson's influence. Her live-streamed commentary, while scratching racist into Detective Martinez's vehicle, eliminated any possibility of claiming she was an unwitting participant. Tyler Walsh accepted a plea bargain rather than face trial, agreeing to testify against Thompson and Rodriguez in exchange for reduced charges. His technical expertise and insider knowledge of the professional protest network made him a valuable witness for prosecutors building cases against similar organizations in other jurisdictions. The character witness phase of Thompson's trial featured testimony from Detective Martinez's colleagues about her exemplary record and dedication to community policing. Sergeant Patricia Williams described Sarah's professional conduct during dangerous undercover operations and her commitment to building positive relationships between law enforcement and the communities they served. Detective Martinez represents the best of modern policing, Sergeant Williams testified while reviewing Sarah's commendations and performance evaluations. She has risked her life countless times to protect our community from drug trafficking and organized crime. The idea that she deserves to be assaulted for her service is reprehensible. The defense's attempt to present character witnesses for Thompson backfired when several of his supposed supporters were revealed to have criminal records or financial relationships with the organizations that funded his activities. Their testimony only reinforced the prosecution's argument that Thompson was a professional agitator rather than a genuine activist. Professor David Hartwell of Riverside University Law School testified as an expert witness about the legal distinctions between protected political speech and criminal behavior. His analysis of the video evidence demonstrated that Thompson's actions fell clearly outside the boundaries of First Amendment protection. Civil disobedience has a long and honored tradition in American political activism, Professor Hartwell explained to the jury. But it requires peaceful acceptance of legal consequences for symbolic violations of unjust laws. Mr. Thompson was not protesting unjust laws. He was committing serious crimes while using political rhetoric to justify criminal behavior. The prosecution's closing argument focused on the defendant's own documentation of their criminal intent and behavior. Chun systematically reviewed the video evidence, showing how each defendant had escalated from legal protest to criminal assault while live-streaming their actions to thousands of witnesses. The defendants want you to believe that political motivation excuses criminal behavior, Chun told the jury during his final argument. But our system of justice does not recognize political goals as justification for assault, vandalism, and attempted kidnapping. These defendants documented their own crimes and broadcast their confessions to the world. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all major charges against Thompson and Rodriguez. The speed of their decision reflected the overwhelming nature of the video evidence and the clarity of the legal standards that have been violated. Judge Nakamura scheduled sentencing hearings for the following month, noting that the defendants' use of social media to coordinate and document their crimes represented an aggravating factor that would influence the penalties imposed by the court. The weeks following the trial verdict were a period of reflection and recovery for Detective Sarah Martinez, though she would never admit publicly that the assault had affected her more deeply than her professional demeanor suggested. 20 years of law enforcement had prepared her for many dangerous situations, but being surrounded by a violent mob while maintaining an undercover identity had tested even her considerable training and experience. Sarah's department required all officers involved in traumatic incidents to undergo psychological evaluation and counseling, a policy that she had always supported in theory but found more challenging to accept when applied to her own situation. Dr. Melissa Rodriguez, the department's clinical psychologist, helped Sarah process the experience and recognize that seeking support was a sign of strength rather than weakness. You maintained professionalism under extreme circumstances while gathering evidence that led to successful prosecutions, Dr. Rodriguez explained during one of their sessions. But that doesn't mean the experience wasn't traumatic. Acknowledging the emotional impact doesn't diminish your professional competence. The counseling sessions helped Sarah understand that her reaction was normal and healthy. Being surrounded by dozens of aggressive individuals who wanted to harm her while she maintained cover to gather evidence had created stress that needed to be addressed rather than ignored. The department's support structure proved more valuable than she had anticipated. Chief William Dobson recognized that Sarah's handling of the situation represented exemplary police work that deserved recognition and could provide training value for other officers. Her combination of tactical restraint, evidence gathering, and professional conduct under pressure had created a textbook example of how to handle complex situations involving political violence. Detective Martinez demonstrated exactly the kind of professional judgment and tactical thinking that we want to see from our officers, Chief Dobson announced at the department's monthly award ceremony. She maintained her cover long enough to document extensive criminal behavior while keeping herself safe and building an ironclad case for prosecution. The incident led to Sarah's selection as a training instructor for the department's Undercover Operations Unit. Her experience provided valuable lessons about evidence gathering, officer safety, and maintaining professional standards even when facing criminal assault. The training materials developed from her case became standard curriculum for departments across the region. Sarah's reputation within the law enforcement community was enhanced rather than damaged by the incident. Her professional handling of an extremely dangerous situation while gathering evidence that led to successful prosecutions demonstrated the highest standards of police work. Colleagues who had already respected her abilities gained even greater appreciation for her skills. The community response to Sarah's involvement was overwhelmingly positive among residents who distinguished between legitimate political activism and criminal behavior. Many community members expressed gratitude that professional agitators who had exploited local concerns for their own purposes had been exposed and prosecuted. Pastor James Williams of the Riverside Community Church, who had been involved in legitimate police reform discussions, publicly praised Sarah's professionalism and differentiated her conduct from the problematic police behavior that genuine activists sought to address. Detective Martinez represents exactly the kind of professional law enforcement that our community needs, Pastor Williams stated during a community meeting. She maintained high standards even when facing criminal assault, and she distinguished between legitimate protesters and violent criminals. This is how police work should be conducted. Sarah began participating in community policing initiatives that brought law enforcement and reform advocates together for constructive dialogue about improving police-community relations. Her experience with both sides of political conflict gave her credibility with genuine activists who shared her commitment to justice and public safety. The police department implemented new protocols for officer safety during civil unrest based on lessons learned from Sarah's experience. The procedures emphasized coordination between undercover operations and uniform patrol, improved communication systems, and enhanced evidence gathering techniques for prosecuting political violence. Detective Liu worked with Sarah to develop training scenarios that prepared other officers for similar situations. The exercises focused on maintaining professional conduct under pressure, evidence gathering techniques, and tactical decision-making when facing organized criminal behavior disguised as political activism. The key lesson from Sarah's experience is that professional competence and tactical restraint can turn a dangerous situation into successful prosecution, Detective Liu explained to training classes. Maintaining your standards even when facing criminal assault is what separates professional law enforcement from vigilante justice. Sarah's case became a model for how police departments could handle politically motivated violence without compromising constitutional rights or professional standards. Her techniques for documenting criminal behavior while maintaining cover provided valuable tools for other undercover operations. The Riverside Police Department received commendations from the International Association of Chiefs of Police for its handling of the incident and the subsequent investigation. The organization highlighted how proper training, professional standards, and community engagement had prevented escalation while ensuring accountability for criminal behavior. Sarah's work contributed to improved relationships between law enforcement and legitimate reform advocates who recognized the difference between professional police conduct and the misconduct they sought to address. Her example demonstrated that good police work supported rather than threatened genuine efforts to improve community safety. The incident also led to policy changes regarding social media evidence in criminal cases. Sarah's experience showed how criminals' own documentation could provide comprehensive evidence for prosecution, leading to new training programs for officers on digital evidence collection and preservation. Personal vindication came for Sarah when community leaders who had initially been skeptical of police accounts recognized that the video evidence supported her version of events completely. The transparency provided by the extensive documentation eliminated any possibility of conflicting narratives about what had occurred. Sarah received letters of support from citizens across the country who had learned about her case through media coverage. Many were from people who appreciated seeing a law enforcement officer maintain high standards even when facing criminal assault, providing hope that professional policing could prevail over both criminal behavior and police misconduct. The psychological evaluation process also helped Sarah develop better coping strategies for future high-stress situations. Dr. Rodriguez worked with her to identify early warning signs of stress accumulation and develop healthy outlets for managing the emotional demands of undercover work. Your ability to maintain professional judgment under extreme pressure is remarkable, Dr. Rodriguez observed. But it's important to recognize that even remarkable people need support systems and coping strategies to maintain their effectiveness over time. Sarah's family relationships were strengthened by the experience, as they gained greater appreciation for the risks she faced in her work and the professional standards she maintained even under extreme pressure. Her husband, Michael, who had been a police officer before transitioning to private security, understood better than most the challenges of maintaining professionalism when facing criminal assault. The incident ultimately enhanced rather than damaged Sarah's career prospects within law enforcement. Her demonstration of professional competence under pressure, combined with her successful evidence gathering and prosecution support, positioned her for advancement to supervisory roles where she could influence training and policy development. The long-term consequences of the Riverside City incident extended far beyond the individual prosecutions, creating ripple effects that transformed how both law enforcement and political activists approached the intersection of protest and criminal behavior. The comprehensive video documentation and successful prosecutions established precedents that would influence similar cases across the country for years to come. Marcus Thompson's conviction and sentencing to 8 years in federal prison effectively ended his career as a professional protest organizer. The racketeering charges connected to his coordination of violence across multiple states sent a clear message to other paid agitators that their activities would face serious federal prosecution rather than the minor local charges they had previously experienced. His former supporters in the professional activism community quickly distanced themselves from Thompson once his criminal behavior became undeniable through video evidence. Organizations that had previously funded his activities quietly terminated their relationships and implemented new screening procedures to avoid association with future criminal conduct. Thompson's federal prison sentence included provisions requiring him to pay restitution to Detective Martinez for the damage to her vehicle and medical expenses related to stress treatment. The financial consequences extended beyond imprisonment to include years of garnished wages and asset forfeiture that would affect his ability to rebuild any kind of activism career after release. The collapse of Thompson's network had significant effects on the broader professional protest ecosystem. Other paid organizers found it more difficult to obtain funding as political organizations became cautious about supporting activities that might cross into criminal behavior and create legal liability for their donors and board members. Emma Rodriguez faced the most severe long-term educational consequences among the college students involved in the assault. Riverside University's disciplinary action included academic probation, community service requirements, and mandatory courses on conflict resolution and legal compliance that extended her graduation timeline by 2 full years. Her criminal conviction created barriers to graduate school admission and professional employment that would persist for years. Many graduate programs in social work, education, and public policy specifically excluded applicants with convictions for assaulting law enforcement officers, effectively ending her planned career in social justice advocacy. Rodriguez's family relationships were severely strained by the financial and reputational consequences of her criminal behavior. Her parents, both respected professionals in the community, faced social isolation and career damage as their daughter's assault on a police officer became widely known through media coverage. The psychological impact on Rodriguez was profound as she struggled to reconcile her self-image as a social justice advocate with the reality that she had participated in criminal assault against a woman who represented the professional law enforcement standards that many communities needed. Therapy sessions helped her understand how she had been manipulated by professional agitators. Tyler Walsh's cooperation with federal investigators provided him with somewhat reduced consequences, but his technical skills had become a liability in the job market as employers recognized that his expertise could be used for illegal coordination activities. Background checks revealed his role in organizing criminal behavior across multiple jurisdictions. His cooperation agreement required ongoing testimony in similar cases across the country, creating a years-long commitment to help prosecute the network he had helped operate. The process was emotionally draining and professionally limiting as his involvement in federal investigations made him unemployable in many technology sectors. The broader impact on college activism was significant as universities implemented new policies to prevent their students from being recruited by professional agitators who exploited campus political organizations for illegal activities. Student groups were required to register their funding sources and outside organizational relationships. Campus security and student life departments developed training programs to help students distinguish between legitimate political activism and criminal behavior disguised as social justice advocacy. The Riverside City case became a standard example in these educational programs. The deterrent effect of the prosecutions was evident in subsequent political demonstrations where professional organizers were notably absent and local activists implemented stronger self-policing to prevent violent elements from infiltrating their events. The financial and legal consequences had made professional protest organizing a much riskier business model. Law enforcement agencies across the country adopted training protocols based on Detective Martinez's experience, emphasizing evidence-gathering techniques and professional conduct standards for officers who might encounter similar organized criminal behavior. Her case became a standard component of police academy curricula. The legal precedents established by the convictions were cited in dozens of subsequent cases involving politically motivated violence. Courts consistently ruled that political motivation did not excuse criminal behavior, and that extensive video documentation eliminated claims of protected First Amendment activity. Federal legislation was introduced to address the funding mechanisms that enabled professional protest networks to coordinate criminal activities across state lines. The proposed laws would require greater transparency in nonprofit funding and create stronger penalties for organizations that supported illegal activities. Community organizations that had been infiltrated by Thompson's network implemented new governance structures to prevent future exploitation by outside agitators. The experience taught legitimate activists the importance of maintaining local control over their movements and objectives. The media narrative around political protest evolved to distinguish more clearly between grassroots activism and manufactured conflict designed to exploit legitimate community concerns for outside political purposes. Journalists developed better techniques for identifying and exposing astroturf movements. Detective Martinez's case contributed to improved police training on social media evidence collection and preservation. Her techniques for documenting criminal behavior while maintaining operational security became standard procedures for undercover operations involving political violence. The incident influenced academic research on political violence and social media manipulation, providing scholars with comprehensive documentation of how professional agitators exploited social media platforms to coordinate criminal behavior while maintaining plausible deniability. Professional activists who had operated similar networks in other cities found themselves under increased scrutiny from federal investigators who used the Riverside City case as a template for identifying and prosecuting organized criminal behavior disguised as political activism. The financial networks that had supported Thompson's operations faced congressional investigation and regulatory scrutiny that made it more difficult to fund professional protest activities through nonprofit organizations. Donors became more cautious about supporting groups that might engage in illegal activities. Insurance companies began excluding coverage for criminal acts committed during political protests, making it more expensive for organizations to support activities that might result in violence. The financial risks associated with supporting professional agitators increased significantly. The case influenced international law enforcement cooperation as similar networks operating in other countries were identified and investigated. The techniques developed for prosecuting Thompson's organization provided tools for addressing politically motivated criminal networks globally. Local government responses included improved coordination between law enforcement and legitimate community organizations to address political concerns through legal channels rather than allowing outside agitators to exploit local issues for their own purposes. 1 year after the incident that had changed her life and career in ways she never could have anticipated, Detective Sarah Martinez found herself driving the same route through Riverside City that had led to her confrontation with Marcus Thompson's criminal organization. The familiar intersection of Maple and 3rd Street now showed no trace of the illegal roadblock that had once transformed a quiet evening commute into a defining moment for both her personal development and the broader relationship between law enforcement and political activism. The intersection flowed smoothly with normal traffic patterns, unmarked by any sign of the violence that had occurred there. Street lights illuminated the crosswalk where protesters had once surrounded her vehicle with criminal intent, and the sidewalks where Marcus Thompson had coordinated his assault now hosted ordinary pedestrians going about their evening routines. Sarah's new Honda Civic, identical to the one that had been damaged beyond repair during the attack, carried upgraded security equipment that reflected lessons learned from her experience. The vehicle's enhanced recording capabilities and communication systems represented improvements that had been implemented department-wide based on her recommendations. The psychological distance from the traumatic events was as significant as the temporal separation. Dr. Rodriguez's counseling had helped Sarah process the experience in ways that strengthened rather than diminished her effectiveness as a law enforcement officer. The incident had become a source of professional pride rather than personal trauma. Her work as a training instructor had evolved into a national role as law enforcement agencies across the country sought her expertise in handling politically motivated violence while maintaining constitutional standards and professional conduct. The techniques she had developed during those dangerous minutes surrounded by a criminal mob had become standard training protocols. The Federal Bureau of Investigation had invited Sarah to join a task force addressing domestic terrorism networks that exploited political movements for criminal purposes. Her experience with Thompson's organization provided valuable insights into how professional agitators operated and how law enforcement could effectively counter their tactics. Riverside City had moved beyond the divisive period of manufactured conflict toward more constructive approaches to addressing legitimate community concerns about police accountability and social justice. The exposure of Thompson's network had actually facilitated better relationships between law enforcement and genuine reform advocates who shared commitments to legal methods and peaceful resolution. Pastor Williams and other community leaders had worked with Sarah and the police department to establish regular dialogue sessions where citizens could raise concerns about law enforcement practices and officers could explain their procedures and constraints. The collaborative approach had proven more effective than confrontational tactics. The The university reforms implemented after Emma Rodriguez's conviction had successfully prevented similar recruitment of students by outside agitators. Campus security reported no incidents of professional protesters attempting to exploit student organizations for illegal activities, suggesting that the deterrent effect of serious criminal prosecutions was working as intended. Rodriguez herself had completed her extended degree program and was working in a nonprofit organization focused on conflict resolution and community mediation. Her criminal record prevented her from pursuing her original career plans, but she had found purpose in helping others avoid the mistakes she had made through better understanding of legal boundaries. Tyler Walsh had successfully completed his cooperation agreement with federal investigators and was working as a cybersecurity consultant, using his technical skills to help organizations protect themselves from the kind of social media manipulation he had once facilitated. His insider knowledge of criminal networking techniques had proven valuable for defensive purposes. Marcus Thompson remained in federal prison, serving his 8-year sentence while facing additional charges in other jurisdictions where his network had operated. His former associates had distanced themselves completely, and the organizations that had funded his activities had implemented new oversight procedures to prevent similar legal liability. The legal precedents established by the Riverside City prosecutions continued to influence cases across the country. Courts consistently cited the comprehensive video documentation and clear criminal intent demonstrated in Thompson's case when rejecting claims that political motivation should excuse violent behavior. Congressional legislation addressing nonprofit funding transparency had passed with bipartisan support, making it more difficult for criminal networks to hide behind legitimate-sounding organizations. The regulatory changes had reduced the funding available for professional protest activities that crossed into illegal territory. Sarah's reputation within law enforcement had been enhanced rather than damaged by her experience. Her demonstration of professional competence under extreme pressure had earned respect from colleagues and superiors who recognized that maintaining standards while facing criminal assault represented the highest ideals of police work. The community response to Sarah's conduct had been overwhelmingly positive among residents who distinguished between legitimate protest and criminal behavior. Many citizens expressed appreciation for her restraint and professionalism, recognizing that different conduct might have escalated the situation into something far worse. International law enforcement agencies had studied the Riverside City case as a model for addressing politically motivated criminal networks that operated across national boundaries. Sarah's techniques for evidence gathering and her analysis of organizational structures had influenced investigations in several countries. The media coverage of the case had evolved from initial attempts to portray the protesters as victims to recognition that clear criminal behavior had been documented and appropriately prosecuted. Journalists had developed better techniques for distinguishing between legitimate activism and manufactured conflict. Academic research based on the case had contributed to improved understanding of how social media platforms could be exploited for criminal coordination and how law enforcement could adapt traditional investigative techniques to address modern forms of political violence. As Sarah completed her evening drive through the intersection where everything had changed, she reflected on the broader lessons that emerged from her experience. The incident had demonstrated that professional competence and adherence to legal standards could prevail over criminal behavior regardless of its political justification. The case had shown that criminals who documented their own illegal activities through social media would face the consequences of their choices, and that political motivation provided no immunity from prosecution for assault, vandalism, and conspiracy. The extensive video evidence had made denial impossible and prosecution inevitable. Most importantly, the experience had illustrated the crucial distinction between legitimate political activism and criminal behavior disguised as social justice advocacy. Genuine reform advocates had distanced themselves from violent tactics, while criminal elements had been exposed and prosecuted. The intersection that had once been blocked by an illegal roadblock now symbolized how order and justice ultimately prevailed over chaos and criminality. The smooth flow of traffic represented the restoration of lawful community standards after a period of manufactured conflict. Sarah's story had become a modern fable about the importance of maintaining professional standards even when facing extreme provocation, and about how criminals who believed they were above the law would ultimately face the consequences of their actions through the justice system they had attempted to exploit and undermine.